should make sure to start recording now. Okay. So you'll notice, 91 points here. So the way things that kind of are, you get to get a perfect score, you have to have earned at least 5 points in each project, right? So this sort of a total here. The most you can earn of this 91 is basically sort of 80 points towards your grade on any one particular project if you wanted to, right? So 80 points of your grade can come from feature points. They could all be on one project technically, right? But if you skip, say, 3 projects, you will lose, irrevocably, you lose 5 points on each of those projects. So you would get 80 points plus 5 for whatever one project you hand in, right? So you can still get an 85 handing in just a single project, right? So I just want to remind everyone of that. Now, I think everyone's at least handed in 2 projects, so they're already in pretty good shape. So with a 3rd project, right, you should have, theoretically, if you went crazy with features, you could potentially wind up with a 95. So you can still get an A. Nobody is, I don't think anyone is really entirely out of it with regards to that. Now, I'm not saying that you should try to implement everything and so on. You've got other grades, you got other classes and so on to worry about, and certainly if this is late in the game, considering that things are supposed to be turned in on last day of class, which is of course Thursday, right? This Thursday. Now, it's really going to be at the official due date is Thursday at the end of the day, so I will still be around for to answer questions, get things done. I'm going to, if you present your game in the class time, and hopefully I've gotten a okay clear on COVID by then. If not, we'll do another sort of online version here, where if you give me the go-ahead, I will basically play your game online. You can kind of talk me through it, talk the rest of the class through it. On the itch version would be the best case scenario. So if you are willing to present your final project as to the class, right? If you deem that it is the presentation worthy, right? That is worth an additional, I'll go big on this one, 5 points, right? So having a presentation-worthy game that that you're willing to kind of walk through is worth 5 points, right? So I'll throw that one out there, right? So that's the bonus points for presenting your game. Let's step through these things just in case, all right? And I'll talk about the things, the feature points that you likely, hopefully already have, and the ones where you're going to be potentially, kind of getting multiple points or, multiple ads and so on, right? itch.io publishing, right? That one is you can get that for every one of your projects. So certainly you can get it certainly for the final one. Using the load scene, right? So if you are going from one scene to another using the scenemanager.load scene, and if you're implementing, say, a lobby system, for example, you would definitely be using a load scene, right? So a lobby system is another feature point down here, lobby, and there's still some people who can earn the lobby and load scene. Scoring system is one you get for all of your games. So I'm going to put these M's back in here. I don't know what happened to my M's. So always want to have some sort of scoring system, right? Somewhere you decide, it's in the player where it's, adding the score. Let me double check. Someone's got, I think I see a 1 over there. So let me make sure that, let me just tell, is a studio day, but presentation. All right. So while I'm talking, if anyone else can kind of, if there's obvious questions or anything like that over there, please let me know. Francisco needed an answer there. Okay. So scoring system. That's a good one. All right, now triggered sounds, that's like, you know, if you have an audio source and you use audio source.play, you know, so if you get component audio source.play in reaction to something, chances are you've already got that one in one of your games, right? If you haven't, get the points. Background music, ambience, that one's real easy. That's just basically having an audio source that plays an audio clip that plays music in your scene. So it's not much involved in programming that one. It's really a matter of mechanically, you know, bringing into the scene. Right, and then we have UI buttons, UI text, UI sliders. I'm not going to talk about all those because you should know how to use the canvas and a UI at this point. Enforcing boundaries, chances are you already got that in your first project. That was really just, you know, compare a vector to x and y to make sure it doesn't go out of range of something. So most people already have that one as well. Getters and setters, right? So for every meaningful use of get and set, so if you're doing something whereby, let's see, I think we showed an actual example of it relatively recently. So in our assets here, I'm going to, well, let's see, I'm going to show you a trick here. In Visual Studio, one of the things that I often do, especially when I am grading, is I will use a search across all files. So let's actually do that. And here I'm going to say that on Windows it's Control-Shift-F. Nope, it's not that. Sorry, Control-Shift-F. Yes, there it is. And so I'm going to look for set, for example, and say find all, and you'll see down here it will find lots of stuff here, lots of sets. So I'm going to have to look for an actual set get, you know, sort of thing here. Member names, nope, not bold. It's going to use a ding, get rid of that, it's not in there, not looted core, miscellaneous utils, nope. So I can go through here and really kind of try to find, this is what I do when you haven't put feature points in. So let's see, where did we do it? I know we did it the other day. So when we added it to the player's score, so the score changed. Let's see, let me pull it up right in here. No, did it not get saved? It looks like it may not have gotten saved. All right. In that case, I will pull up a bit of code now for you to refer to. On the internet, yes, we can use the internet even. Watch this. Unity C# set get. All right. So for example, here is setting and getting the health function. Now, why would you do this? So that you can just say health plus equals 1, and it will add it to the appropriate value here and do the right thing, right? So if you wanted to update text on the screen or something, double check here. Nope, that's somebody else I have to get back to. Sorry, it's always tricky when I have two things going on. So this is, remember, this is the set and get here. Now, just doing sort of a plain vanilla version of it here would be adequate. You can see maybe some more examples. So let's see. Well, these are pretty typical as well, where they just say, okay, you know, if you want to change a number on there. But set and get, oh, here's a good one, all right? So if you wanted to have some function get called or some event get called as a result of the name changing, right? So you can always get the name. You just ask, okay, give me the name of something. But then here, if you set the value for name, it would set this and maybe call an event or something like that based on name changing, right? So that's one thing. You can refer back to this. All right. And let's go back over here. So set and get. That's part of your setup of a component, right? Okay. Enums is the one thing we really didn't cover. I'm going to leave that one just off the board for now. All right, C# inheritance, right? So if you are doing something really simple, you know, just using mono behavior and, you know, this is actually inheritance, but it's not a good demonstration of inheritance here. We really want to see you do something like have, oh, I guess my computer did crash before this all happened. Whereby, let's see, our player here, let's see, does he still work? I hope he still works. If he still works, that means that stuff is still in here, and I just didn't find it straight off. All right, he's still working, so let's see. I choose my player, and here's my platform controller. Let's pull that up. Huh, okay. Must have crashed as I was exiting class the other day. All right. It's unusual. Let's find that other scene. The Tilemap Physics scene here. Okay. We'll be in the other Tilemap, or the other scene here. So imagine I wanted to have some different types of character controllers, and I know that there's a basic functionality that I wanted to have in each of them. And that basic functionality might be, we'll go back here. If I look at the platform controller, I know that in almost all of my controllers, I do this part here. I set input vector, and I get my input, right? The difference might be what I do with that input, right? So I might say create a class which is, what happened to my base? Yeah, that should be saved. Wow, what? Okay. I'm going to create a C# script. I'm going to call it base controller. Right. So in this base controller, I might say, oh, okay, the update routine for the base controller is going to take care of all this stuff. Right. So I'm going to put that in base controller. Right. So now my jump, input vector, rigid body, they're going to get set up as part of the kind of standard here. And I'm going to make these, if I remember, protected. Right? So anything I want to share across multiple classes, I make protected. Okay. And now over in Platform Controller, I'm going to tell it that this is deriving from Base Controller. Right? So you'll notice now I have no start, I have no update in here, I just have the fixed update, which is then going to refer to jump and input vector and so on in the base controller. Okay? So let's see. Save that. Save the platform controller. And now the nice thing is I could make another type of controller. Maybe it's not a platform controller. Maybe it's a, a shoot 'em up controller or something that could use this basic part here, right? Getting the horizontal and the vertical axis and getting the rigid body, and that would all be set up for no matter who. But then everybody else can create different types of controllers here. And it's the same thing. You could do the same thing with enemies and so on, right? So this is just a bit of a review. There was a whole lecture on inheritance, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated. But it does have to have. It involves two classes, some sort of base class that you create, and some sort of inherited class, right? Just using mono behavior isn't quite good enough. All right, so it all still works because it's using inheritance there. Okay, so that was a really, really quick version of using inheritance. Okay, so I just did C# inheritance. Lobby, that one's an easy one, right? That should be, you have a lobby screen, you set up a number of different buttons, and each button takes you using the scene manager.load scene, brings you to the appropriate game in your game, right? That one's easy. Parallax, there are a number of different tutorials out on the internet if you want to do it in a number of those ways, or we in class demonstrated a way to use a perspective camera which allowed you to kind of move the camera side to side with 3D objects and other objects to have things kind of move front to back. So you can Google for that one if you want, or unfortunately don't have a recording of the 2.5D lecture. But if you remember that one, that was sort of the idea behind there. It's using a perspective camera and having objects kind of change in relation to the camera. General camera movement, okay? That can be something as simple as, changing, lerping the camera's position according to the player's movement. Lerping the camera position to the player's position, right? Lerping is another one that is, a thing worth points. And let's see. So in here we had the main camera, and the main camera had, let's see, it did at one point, it had a camera controller on it. Let's open up that. And it was doing a simple lerp from its position to the player's position. And then it had, some fixed amount it would move to there. So we're kind of using a dumb lerp here, right? Because it's always going from its current position towards the player's position. It's like Zeno's paradox, right? Moving from here towards this position, right? And that becomes our new position that we want to be at, right? In this case, the camera has a rigid body on it. We added a rigid body onto this. It's going to be I believe it's a kinematic rigid body. Oh no, it's a dynamic rigid body. Nope. Let's see. Main camera. Yep. Okay, it's a dynamic rigid body. Let's unpause there. You could have also just changed the transform dot position. In the case of a camera, that's probably the easiest thing to do. We're just going to say transform dot position, right? And we're going to skip this part altogether since this is the camera controller. I'm going to do a real simple camera controller here, right? So we're going to lerp from the current position towards the player's position. And we're doing, roughly a third of the way there, but we're modifying it by delta time so we don't move really, really, really fast. Okay, so let's save that. Come over here, and now you'll see when I hit play, I'm kind of going a little bit quick here because I want to cover 91 points worth of, well, maybe not entirely 91, but a fair number of points here. All right, so now if I hit play, whoops, camera went. Oh, I know. The problem there is that the main camera needs to be not on the same plane as the player, right? So the one piece of this, the camera needs to be at -10. So we have to be careful. Just like when we moved the baskets, we didn't want them to be on top of the mouse on the screen. So we need to say transform position equals that, but then we want to, let's see, let's have a temporary variable in here, right? So we'll do something easy. We'll say vector 3 new position, and we'll say new position equals, that's where we want to go. But the one thing we want to change about that new position is to say new position dot z equals, we know offhand that it's -10 because we don't want it to collapse the scene, right? And now we can say transform dot position equals new position. All right? So that will lerp the camera towards the player, and it will reset this Z here so that it won't be collapsed into the scene. So all right. We'll hit play. And now right, we wind up with the camera nicely sort of interpolating where the player is. Okay? So feel free to be even more creative with that. But that, let's see, what did I just earn? How many points did I just earn? 2 points? I did camera movement and I did lerping. 3 points. Two for lerping, 1 for camera movement. All right? Now, AI state machine. This can count as one of 2 things, right? If you were to use the animator state machine to perform some sort of kind of AI sort of behavior, or if you were to implement your own sort of state machine where you keep track of the state of some entity, like is it chasing, is it hungry, is it pursuing, and you basically have a switch statement. Hopefully this will make sense to you if you paid attention in lectures, right? You have a switch statement that say, okay, as long as you are in the hungry state, this is what you do. As long as you're in the chasing state, this is what you do. As long as you are in the scared state, this is what you do, right? That's the sort of thing there. Usually we manage that by having some sort of switch statement that has, based on that state, that is what you do. Oh, that's another case of using an enum actually, because you can have an enum of the possible states, and then use a switch statement to create a state machine to kind of implement what that is, right? So, for example, let's start one of those, right? Let me just point you in the direction of something like that. So, imagine we had an enemy here. Use an enemy, I guess we'll have to use the same skeleton. We don't have any other enemies here. Oh no, spaceship sprite. somewhere I lost some work here. Okay. I was just thinking to myself, yeah, where did that go? So spaceships. I'm going to bring a spaceship into the scene just for the heck of it. And so this spaceship, I'm going to add a component to the spaceship, which is going to be just behavior. All right, so here's spaceship behavior. Create an add. So let me give you the overall structure for this, if you want to follow. Now, you can adapt this based on things that you've done before. So this is just, meant to kind of get you going on it, right? So basically what we want to say is we have a switch statement, and this is going to be based on, we'll call it AI state. Whoops, not that. I meant to not be in insert mode. There we go. AI state. And so you would basically want to say case, and you can have a number of different things. It could be case in pursuing, right? Break. Case escaping, break. Default. Right. So in here, in each side of each one of these case statements, you would put what the current behavior is. And then at some point you have to define, all right, well, what's going to keep it in that behavior, or what's going to make it leave that behavior. But we haven't even defined this, what is AI state yet. So let's come up here, and we're going to say also enum, code snippet for enum. Look at that. What is a code snippet? Tab twice to insert the num snippet. Oh, wow, look at that. Okay, so we're going to call this a states, right? Or maybe even my states. And we're going to have pursuing. And we're going to have escaping. And always go back, double check our good old friend on here, C# enum. Right? That's what it's going to look like here. Enum, season, and we have spring, summer, autumn, fall, winter. It's autumn, winter, sorry. All right, so that's where we're heading. Here we have this, and I just wanted to make sure that there was no comma after the last one or no colon after the last one. Okay, so these are my states now. So what we need now to do is we're going to say AI state. We're going to declare one, right? Well, it's going to be my states AI state. Right? Now you'll notice here it does not exist in the current context. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say my states. So now we have in here, we can do another 2 for 1. Do we have my states escaping? Oh, escaping. There we go. All right. And let's say, let's start off equals, what do we want to be? Maybe we should have my states dot idle is really what we want to have in here. So we want to come up here and create an idle state as well. Okay. So let's put another case in here. Case. All right. So now it'd be a matter of deciding, okay, what is it doing in each of these cases and what causes it to change that state? All right. So we're not going to flesh out the whole thing, but here's what an enum looks like, and here's what basically an AI state machine, if we wanted to develop our own, would look like, right? And then it's a matter of saying, okay, like in here you would say, or somewhere you would say, maybe you have a on collision enter 2D, right? If somebody collides with me, what should happen? My AI state should get set to my states dot escaping. Right? That's the idea, right? You have something that causes a change of state, right? We would have something else that was like, okay, and I'm just going to prototype this. I'm going to say private void on enemy spotted, right? Now I don't know what causes that to happen, right? I don't know. Maybe this is something that maybe should be public because maybe somebody else needs to call this. But then if enemy was spotted, I might say AI state equals my states dot pursuing, right? So there's a quick example of that. All right. So that's another technique. So we just did that. So we just covered enums, and we created our own little AI state machine. Now, coroutines, there's a whole lecture on that, and for each good use of a coroutine, that is worth multiple points, right? So a coroutine is an I enumerator. Coroutine is great for things like, fading in objects, changing things over the course of time, animating motion, and so on. Refer back to that lecture to get that one, right? So you should definitely think about that one. Animations, they're easy, and depending on how they're done, get carried away. But I'm willing to potentially give you multiple points for multiple animations, right? So we'll see how that goes. Blend trees are a special use of the animation state machine. It's going to be too much to talk about right now, so we'll leave that one. If you're looking to really kind of polish things, and it's basically a more advanced use of the triggers and floats and other things inside of the animator, right? So up in here, let's do a quick, I guess I'll do this real quick. We'll go window, animation. We'll open up the animation window just so I can click on spaceships and say create an animation for the spaceships. And we'll go to assets, animations. Ugh, I don't know what I want to call this one. We'll just say spaceship anim because I don't know what I'm using animating just yet. What I really wanted to get to is, whoops. Oh, that wasn't what I wanted to double click on. I wanted to double click on this controller that it created for me. Remember our animation controllers here, where we have an entry and then it just runs that one particular animation, right? If I right click, you'll see here, I can create states, new states, right? An empty state, or I can actually create this blend tree, which we didn't really get into. it's more of an advanced topic at this point. Usually I cover that once everybody's got the basics of animation trees down, which not quite everybody's got it. So let's, if you are looking for that, if you've already done a normal animation tree and you want to get fancy, ask me about that and I'll follow up with you. But for now, it's best to avoid that one. All right. So let's think of what do I mean by, what am I talking about when I say the animation, oops, how did I get there? Game. Let's go back here to the spaceship, the normal. There, we're going to go back up to the base layer. What do I mean by that? So right now I have one spaceship animation, right? I only have one state for it. If I had things like, firing engines, that would be another state. So imagine I had create a state empty, and we'll call this one engines active, right? And this one I'm going to rename engines idle, right? So if I said that we should transition from engines idle to engines active, what would cause that to change? Or I might have one that said, okay, go from engines active to engines idle. And there's a transition that would be associated with that, right? So I might set up a variable parameters. I'm going to say the thing I'm interested in, I'm going to add a float, which is going to be, we're going to call it E velocity, right? And that's a float, so we're going to say that the engines must be active. They should be active when this transition. We're just going to do quick version. We're going to say when E velocity is greater than 0, it should go there. Well, let's make another transition. And so the first one is greater than 0, and we'll have the other one be when velocity is less than 0. It'll know to go to engines active, right? And then this one will be triggered by E velocity let's see, we're going to say less than 0.01. Yeah, we should do that. I'll give it a little bit of range here. Less than 0.01, and we'll have another range. Let's say E velocity is greater than negative 0.01, right? So the engines will only be active if there's a little bit here, right? 0.01 and negative 0.01. And let's go back to these over here, and we'll give it a little bit, right? Less than, so we'll give it a little bit of a range for it to not be weird on, let's see. Negative 0.01 greater than, all right. So I'm just setting up a little bit more of a fancier state machine here. I need to add some things here, but this is the idea of the animation state machine in here, right? Where we're using the different transitions. We would normally set up the animations out here, and then we'd go in here and kind of fine-tune what conditions does it change under, right? So that's worth points like that, right? And let's see, what time is it? It is 2:44. All right. You could refer back to the animation lecture to remember how to put the actual animations on each one of those steps here. Right now, they're just both empty steps. They don't have actual animations on them, but just jog your memory, right? That's what it's about today. Input system, input.get, right? You should know that. Input get access, right? That's the ones we want to use that for, so you should be already using that, chances are, right? Joints. We've been talking about these a bunch of times the last couple of days. For those of you who haven't been in class, you're going to have to do a little bit of Googling and maybe follow a tutorial or two on the internet to kind of catch up on some of these. But the main idea now, like in our platformer here, let's jump back to our scene. Let's see, it's a game and our scene. We had, let's see, I'm going to save this one. The other one is, I think, even easier to see, assuming it still works. So save this scene, and let's go to the other scene, which had our tile platforms. Tilemap Physics. So you'll notice here in our scene, okay, our skeleton moves along, gets to here, and this kind of moves down. And I can jump over here, and that does this. Okay. Looks pretty elaborate. Now, how is that done? How does it work? Well, through the use of joints, right, and physics. So this scene has a couple of different joints in it, and these joints are actually applied to tile maps. A joint can be applied to anything, any object in here. It could be a tile map. It could be just an individual object, game object, and so on. But there's a bunch of different types. There's, like, for example, the slider joint that allows this to slide up and down according to gravity, and it has a motor on it that's going to try to keep it up in that position. And there is down here, this one down here has a hinge joint on it that has a motor on it that is going to keep to try to keep this hinge closed, right? So you can see here I've set a simple hinge here, right? So the extent, so it's allowed to swing through this arc here. And let's see, let's look up the slider while we're here. The slider is allowed to, here's the center of motion here, so it's allowed to slide along here, which basically means this is going to slide down to here. Watch as I walk over to it. Ready? Okay. Now, if I come over here and underneath it, I can kick it up and have it kind of move. And the next one is also moving throughout its range here. Let's see. Yeah. So you're going to walk over and you'll see it will swing between that 0 and 90, for example. All right. All right. So there are all sorts of different joints that you can potentially use. In our other scene, we did okay. Sorry, I just thought maybe I just found my other sprite, my other scripts, but I guess I didn't. In our other platformer here, we had a couple of other different platforms. This has a hinge joint on it. This one does not have any joints on it. That one does not. That one does not. Does square have it? Let's hide that just so I don't forget about that. so we just have another joint in here, another hinge joint basically. That one's just opening and closing there. Let's put a spring joint on here as well. Let's try that. So I'm going to add a component, and here's where you'll see all your joints in here. As I said, joint. You'll see distance joint 2D, fixed joint 2D, friction joint 2D, hinge joint 2D, relative joint 2D, slider joint, and so on. We're going to just grab spring joint 2D, add that in here. That's a nice, relatively straightforward one. And you'll see that it is pointing from a certain location here, which we don't want to auto, like right now it's just auto configured itself to put that spring right there. We don't want it to be there. We want the spring to be, say, from here, so that we'll have some bounce to it. Where are we here? Hinge joint, spring joint. And let's see. Right. So now it's trying to close, but it's got a little bit of that spring in there. Now, looks like our player doesn't have much mass here. Let's try to add some mass to our player. Let's make the player a little heavier here. It adds a little bit of springiness to it. Not much. But the idea behind a spring, basically just like in physics, you have some kind of spring constant. It wants to like hold something at a certain position, and it will fight to return to that position after it's been kind of moved, right? So we'll leave that one. And let's see if it's okay with everyone. It's been, what, 52 odd minutes. Now what I'd like you to do, think about some of those things. Look through this list here. I'm going to take a brief pause and put this up on the screen here. So we talked about joints, effectors. We've had lectures for that, lectures for all these things basically. But I'm going to excuse myself for just a moment. I'll come right back. But think about things on this list. If you have if you have a question about something I just already showed, or a question about anything on this list that you want to include, now's a good time to ask. Or if you're working on your game and you have a question about any of these things, let me know, right? So I'm going from this list. I'm not looking for, like I said, I'm not looking for masterpieces or creative things. I'm saying, okay, can you implement any of these features, right? That's the programming part. So I'll be back in 1 second, okay? That's all right. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to leave that on the screen and to momentarily mute myself. Okay, back in a second. Okay. Yep, messed up my microphone. Sorry about that. I am back. So let's see. I don't get too much. Trying to balance this. I want people to know what the features are available and kind of what the extent. You know, again, I guess I'm kind of running through these things quickly and showing the implementation because it's like you don't have to get carried away with them. I'm not looking for completely masterful uses of these things necessarily. I just want to see that, you know, you can include them. So including a couple of simple platforms that, you know, you can bounce from one to the other. You can, you know, have a trapdoor that opens or closes, you know, add a motor to it so it'll bear a certain amount of weight and so on. That would be kind of what I'm going for here. Oh, someone wants to go over singletons. Great. Okay, we have a great question. All right, so let's talk about singletons. All right. So the idea behind a singleton is so that so that you can have only one of something, right? So if you accidentally create two of something in the scene, one of them will get rid of itself, right? That's sort of the idea. And the nice thing about that is if you're using don't destroy on load, that's one of the reasons we use it a lot, is if you have don't destroy on load, you don't want to accidentally create new, you know, more and more versions of something, right? If you have, like, say, background music in the scene, and the background music is playing throughout your whole game, and you return to the scene that started the background music, you don't want to start more background music. So let's specifically do that. All right. So I'm going to find a scene, and I might do this graphically instead of doing background music, but we'll do that. All right, that'll work. So in assets, in scenes, I'm going to create a scene and create. I never find scenes here. Scene, and we'll call this the singleton scene. And I'll call it explicitly singleton scene just because. Let's save that last scene. All right. So the main idea here is now I want some object in this scene that there can only be one of that object. So let's just create, well, let's pull in the player. Right? And now, for those of you who are not using the Universal Render Pipeline, just bear with me on this. I'm just going to put 2D global light. If you don't understand what I just did, it's because you weren't here for our Universal Render Pipeline discussion. But anyway, I needed to do that so you could see the sprite there. All right. So here's the thing. I've got one player, right? And I only ever want to have one player, right? So let's put a singleton component. We're going to create a singleton component here. It's going to be called singleton. We'll do it that way, right? Just have a singleton component, for example. One way of doing it. All right. So what should our singleton component look like? All right. Now, one of the things we'll need to do is within the singleton component, we have to have some way of realizing that we only want one of these, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we have something that is static to the whole class, right? So when you have something that is static in a class, it means there's only one of these that is shared across all classes, all instances of this class, right? So let's call this, we're going to have some kind of reference to itself here, right? So we can say singleton, static singleton instance, all right? This is often how we do this. underscore, meaning this is some kind of private thing that we don't want anyone else to see, right? So this here, I'm basically saying that there's going to be a reference to a singleton here, right? Now, that's going to start off, if I don't initialize that, it's going to be null, okay? So I want to do this in as early on as I can here. So I'm going to say void awake, right? That's the earliest thing I can do. And I'm not going to have an update. I'm not going to have a update or start. I'm only going to have this in awake. So I'm going to say if instance does not equal null. Now, so what's happening here is I'm saying, okay, I have awoken, and I'm going to check, is this equal to null? Right? So it's going to say, all right, if it's equal to null, that means that nobody else, there's no other instances have been actually made yet. This has not been initialized. Nobody else has awakened, right? So you got to think of this as sort of like musical chairs, right? That's kind of what singletons are like. You have one chair, and you have musical chairs, so people might want to sit in that chair, but you only have one chair. So if anyone else tries to sit in that chair, they get ejected from the game, right? So I said, oh, if instance is equal to null, I'm going to say instance equals this. Whoops, this. Which means, sure enough, that I'm going to be the one that gets to sit in the chair. Okay? So if no one's sitting in the chair, I get to sit in the chair. Okay? So next up, I'm going to say, and this is kind of the brute force way, if instance does not equal this, destroy game object. All right. So I'm going to claim my spot and then check. If instance and this, not me, that means somebody else got through here, and it's not me. If so, destroy them. All right, so let's save that. See if I did that right. Okay, so if all goes well, this will be fine. I'll hit play. The player's going to fall down because nothing's going to catch him. Her, it, skeleton. Skeleton's going to fall, nothing to catch it. Oh, no, went away. No, there it is. Okay. No, wait, did it? What happened here? Hit play. It went away. So why did it go away? Let's look at that. It probably went too quick. So let's do some debugging. All right. So I'll set a breakpoint here. Right-click in this column. You should all know this by now too. All right. There's a little bit of debugging here. So I'm going to set a breakpoint right there. All right. So I'm also going to say debug, and there should be attach Unity. Oh no, sorry, attach to Unity. There it is. All right. I'm going to come over here, press play. Okay, it hit this. Now, let's see what's happening. All right, instance is equal to null. Oh, I should have said if instance equals null, instance is this. So I know right ahead. That's what I did. I immediately did the wrong thing because it's saying, it's assuming that somebody's already in the chair, so no, I don't get to sit in the chair, or something like that. So I shouldn't have said that. That's the problem. So we'll say continue, and this will bring us over here, and we'll stop. Okay, let's get back here. Sorry, I should have said if nobody's sitting in the chair, right? Let's put a, by the way, we should put this feature singleton all right. No instance set instance to this component, right? Right, now we're going to say, it's basically if instance does not equal to this, right, meaning it's somebody else trying to come in here and claim the seat, right? So we'll say only keep if you're in the seat. We'll call it that, right? Save, and that should hopefully work better. Sorry. Little rumbling tummy. That was the. I didn't realize that certain types of tummy rumblings count as COVID symptoms. Anyway, so it's null. I'm going to continue. So I'm going to say, I'm going to use my step into here. Ready? Step into. So it's saying, okay, instance is null. Therefore, it's going to set it. All right. Come down here, and it's going to say, okay, instance is this one, the player's singleton. So, all right, that's the one we're on. So we'll continue. We didn't destroy it because that was us, right? Continue. It's all good. The player's there. The player drops. All right. So far we didn't accomplish really much of anything. Now here's where the magic occurs. I'm going to grab this player, and I'm going to duplicate the player. So now we have the player and player 1. So only one of these should be allowed to exist at any point. This is a mistake, having 2 players, right? We only want 1 player. So now you'll notice I'm going to hit play, and what will happen, we should get over there into the debugger again, hopefully. Right? We hit this, and instance is null. That's fine. So we'll continue. We'll say, all right, step over. All right, we set that equal there. We claim the seat. We're good to go. Continue. It hits it again now because we have the second player that we're trying to do. Now you'll notice if instance equals null, all right, that's false now. So we're going to continue. We're going to step over. That's skipped entirely. Now we're going to compare instance this to this. This is player singleton. Instance is player 1 singleton. All right. So they're not the same. Right? That's evaluating to true. So we will step over that statement. You'll see now we're going in here. All right. So the one we're on now is going to get destroyed. So if we say continue, you'll see that one of them has disappeared. Right? It destroyed it. Now, which one? It's kind of tricky. You can't really control. With singletons, it's tough when they're in the scene like this to really control which one is getting destroyed, which one's going to be preserved, which one's going to be destroyed. You don't really know, right? You might have thought, well, this one will be the first one, but it turned out not to be. It turned out that this one was, right? Usually you're using singletons to have, like I said, something that's like background music, right? So this would be, if I used the player here, like if there's another thing in the player that was, let's go one step further, and we'll say that we want to use that don't destroy on load, right? So we'll assume that if you're the first player, you get to exist, continue to exist. So let's go to our player again and go to Singleton. And here's where we're getting into that seat. So we can also call don't destroy on load and say the game object that belongs to whoever is there, right? They're not going to get destroyed, right? So let's say if we had said don't destroy on load without this, and we reload the scene. So let's see, we want to do something to reload this scene. Let's see. I'm going to have a game manager, right? We like to have game managers. We like to have scene managers, something like that. So we're going to add an empty object, and I'm going to call this scene. No, not scene manager. That's a bad choice. Just call it manager, right? That's going to be our little manager that's going to manage the scene. And the one thing I'm going to want to have this do, here's the idea, is I'm going to create a new script that says, we'll make this the manager reload script. This is a very contrived, as they say, version of something. So we just open a new script, and I'm going to show you the power of don't destroy on load, right? I guess that would be one good thing I could do this. So we'll watch this. Ready? We're going to say invoke yeah. Start over, right? You remember, maybe we have, you remember invoke, and that's another feature point. Not everyone used invoke, believe it or not. So we're going to have start over, and we're going to start over automatically in 5 seconds, right? So this is going to be really dumb. But yes, for some reason, all this scene is going to do is going to start over, right? So I'm going to create a function, void start over. All right. And all this is going to do is, I want to make sure using scene management, going to make sure you use that. All right. And so start over is going to say scene manager load scene, and the scene that I'm going to load is the Singleton scene. All right. So let's watch what happens when I do that. So it's basically going to say every 5 seconds, restart the scene. Now, 5 seconds is a lot, especially for... Are we still active? People still watching? All right. Okay. So I hit play, and what should happen is we should see the skeletons, they should both, well, let's get rid of our breakpoint over there now, continue. After 5 seconds, our scene reloads. After 5 seconds, it reloads. Now, the thing you may notice is that player 1 is there, and player 1 is falling, right? Continuously falling. So let's look at, not platform controller, but let's, do I want to stop debugging? No. So player 1, I'm going to call up our singleton thing again. All right. Let's disable this singleton script. All right. I can't disable it because it's on awake. So awake has to happen. Do this. Okay, I'm gonna just. I'll just remove the singleton component from each of them. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna remove that script altogether. So remove component on player and remove the component on player 1. Okay. So now if we restart the scene, let's watch what happens. So wait 5 seconds. And if the scene restarts, so do these guys. Right? They move back to where they started off, right? Because they're just always showing up in the scene, right? So they're right there at the beginning of the scene. So they happen over and over and over again, right? Reload scene loads the whole scene again, right? So everything that's in the scene restarts every 5 seconds. So imagine it was background music. You wouldn't want the background music restarting every 5 seconds, so you want to use don't destroy on load. Okay. So now let's say we have our player here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our singleton back on here. Right, our singleton, I guess we could put it right there. Okay, let's put it right in the prefab for player. So player, where'd it go? Singleton. All right. So we're adding that to the prefab. So now it has the singleton on there. All right, let's go back to the scene. So each of these should already have that. Yeah, both of them have singleton on them now. And if we look at the script, one of them is going to be allowed to exist. So we could do something if instead of this we had just called don't destroy on load, we would get a new player every time, right? So let's do this. Let's say this portion, or well, I guess we could like take all of this. Right, this would have just don't destroy on load, right? The equivalent of don't destroy on load without the singleton around it, right? So don't destroy on load just means that these players will continue to exist even if the scene is restarted, right? On loading a scene, it's going to keep the player, right? So you'll see up here, if we watch carefully now, it's going to start off with 2 players, and then in 5 seconds it'll load the scene again. And we're going to add some more players. Notice there's player, player, player 1, player 1. 5 seconds later, player 1, player 1, player 1, right? Because every time the scene loads, we're getting more players. And because it says don't destroy on load, it means don't remove the existing players from the scene. Does that make sense? I'll ask Mari, does that make sense? Okay. So the way to keep them from happening is this singleton around here, right? So let's put the singleton bit back in to say if there's already, right, there's only one slot, there's only one musical chair we can sit in. And whoever is lucky enough to be the first one gets to put themselves in that chair and gets to say don't destroy on load for them, right? So every time the scene is loaded subsequently, then the any other players will not get created, right? So it's a way to prevent any new players from getting created. You just keep the old one, keep the one that you started off with. And that's the reason you'll see down here, it doesn't move back to the beginning, it doesn't get reinitialized, it keeps falling, 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 falling. And if we see over here, you notice it's never getting back to, it's never reinitializing because it's that original one not getting destroyed over and over and over again. All right? So if we had music, it would just continuously play. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see. I have to find some music. I'm sure I have music on here somewhere. Search for music over on my other, my other screen here, so you don't get to. Maybe data. Do I really not have any MP3 files? Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm going to grab this, bring it into my project. Stop the search that's going on in the background here. All right. So now, where to go? Here we go. We've got some cool dubstep background here. Did you hear that? Did that work? Okay. So we're going to put that on the player prefab, right? So where did our player prefab go? We're going to open the prefab there, and we'll grab this cool dubstep thing, and we will add component audio source, and we'll add that clip there, right? So now, when whatever player is lucky enough, the player is going to generate his own kind of soundtrack here, right? So let's start the game. Right. So even as the scene restarts, the music doesn't. Right? And that's because the audio source is on this game object that never gets destroyed. Right? So it never reloads itself. It just keeps going on and on and on. So that's one of the big uses of don't destroy on load and singletons. We do something like that. So if you want to enforce that there's only one player in the game, or there's only one of whatever object as you go from scene to scene to scene, you can do that. And then you can use don't destroy unload to also, to keep it around, and there's only one of them. Okay? Any other Singleton questions? I'll pull the code up again. And sometimes there's definitely subtle differences. Some people code it differently. This is kind of the one real basic way to do it, but it's all about that notion of enforcing uniqueness, right? Enforcing there to be only one of these. And it's convenient in C# that we have this, static member of this class here, which exists for all members of that class or all instances of that class. Right? They all share that same one. Okay. Okay, if we're good with singletons, let's pull up the sheet again here. Misjudged that one. There we go. All right. So let's see. Input system, joints, effectors, instantiating prefabs. I've decided that I'm giving multiples for the creative use of instantiating multiple prefabs. So if you are doing things like you're instantiating your power-ups and you're instantiating bullets, I may give you multiple points for that, right? So you can, on every time you call instantiate, if they're slightly different, because sometimes you're doing it as child objects, and sometimes you're doing it in adding force, and sometimes you're doing it so and so on. You can do that. Lists and arrays. Those, I'm going to recommend you go back to the lectures if you haven't already. Go back to the early lectures to see how you use lists and arrays for important things, keep track of groups of items and so on. Dictionaries was a bonus for those advanced users who are coming from other languages. They already had dictionaries if you wanted to use those. So I didn't really talk about those, but it's a bonus for those if you're more advanced in computer science. Same thing goes with use of classes and structs, right? So those are kind of for our more advanced users there. Tilemaps. We talked about tilemaps. There's lots of information about using tilemaps out there, about how to load a tilemap, get an existing tilemap, design your level using a tilemap. So, for example, this other scene that we'd been looking at here, the Tilemap Physics scene. This is using tilemaps. We have one tilemap. There are 3 tilemaps here. The static tilemap with a collider and a composite collider and a static rigid body 2D on it. That is our background, right? So that's the first tilemap there, and it has these, these things that the player can walk along. And then it has 2 other tilemaps. One, which is this trapdoor, and the other one, we have an invisible trapdoor, but we also have this kind of different dropping thing here. So we have a couple of different tilemaps, but the main tilemap is just this one in the background here, and you'll see, once I have it selected, you'll say, open tile palette. Okay, you can see the tile palette that I can use, and I could select different things and put them in my scene if I wanted to. What should I do? Oh, this isn't really the greatest tilemap here. I could put cacti. Ding, ding. And you'll notice now I added them to the static background, so that's the player's going to collide with those, right? And of course, the player uses the background in the prefab now. More than I bargained for there. So that's basic tilemaps. the first one really just use it for backgrounds. I would recommend if you're using joints and effectors and stuff for the first time, you probably don't want to use them on tile maps because that can be kind of weird, and setting their positions, setting their centers, and so on can be tricky when it comes to joints and effectors and tile maps. A little bit tricky. Okay, but basic tile maps, that's pretty straightforward. Player prefs, most people should have done by now. That's where you're saving your high score, restoring your high score, and so on. Colliders, right? Colliders and triggers, hopefully you've encountered them or used them. If you're doing a power-up, say, you probably are using a trigger, right? So the moment that you don't want to bounce off of a power-up, you want to just touch it and without any sort of physics interaction. So it makes sense to use a trigger for that, right? So that's why you'd use that. Or if there's like an enemy that you want to collide with, then you use a collider for that. Raycasting and line casting and dot product, these all come into use specifically for things like the enemy AI. So I'm going to refer you back to the enemy AI lecture notes about how we used raycasting and line casting, also to the grounded lecture to see how we used casting, using line casting or circle cast or circle collisions, circle overlap, those sorts of things. I'll give you points for that as well in this topic here, saying, okay, to get enemy behavior to do the right thing, right? Scriptable objects is sort of another way to store data. It's almost like having a static structure that exists that you can always refer to. I'm going to refer you back to the lecture for that. That's really if you have sort of templated data, like say you have a card system or an inventory system or some type of crafting system, and you want to just like add new things, you might have a scriptable object, which is basically a data container. So like you might have, think of a Minecraft block, and then you have certain characteristics of each type of Minecraft block. So a scriptable object would be your Minecraft block, and then the variables within there, the characteristics within each scriptable object would tell you, what type of block it is, how many times it takes to hit before it's destroyed, how heavy is it, all those sorts of things. Right? All right. Reuse a script. This one's actually pretty simple. This is like, okay, you used a script on multiple different objects to do different things, right? So even if you created two enemies that all they did was have, say, some different, different sprites, entirely different looking, but they had the same behavior, and so you actually use the same enemy component, that would count, right? So if you have some enemy script, and technically, I suppose, if you're using inheritance, it's kind of like you reusing a script, sort of, kind of, but this is sort of a simpler version where it's just like I'll let you, just use a script for more than one particular object, right? That's the idea. Time delta time, that one you should all know of. That's really just our way of scaling things inside of our update so that we don't wind up moving too fast, basically, right? Because we're using the amount of time that actually has passed. Safe spawning. This is another use of using like circle cast or raycast or collisions and so on to make sure that if the player respawns in the game or an enemy spawns into the game, it doesn't spawn on top of it, right? So you can do something like, you check. You say, oh, if I collide with something using line cast, circle collider, overlap, or whatever, if that collision occurs, well, generate a new place for it to put the player as they spawn in. Or maybe you have just like four corners of the screen, and you say, okay, the player or the enemies can spawn into one of those four areas, but only the one that is furthest from the player. Right? I'll let you figure out how you want to do that. Say, okay, what's the distance from the player? So every time something spawns, you might say, okay, there's one of four locations. You could use a random number to pick one of those four locations, and then say, is that far enough away from the player? Oh, that's another way of saying make it safe. Okay, so have some sort of algorithm you decide so that if something is spawned into the scene, right, or you have a new wave of enemies that come into the scene so that they won't collide with the player. That's what this one about. Use of gizmos or debug lines. Debug draw line, right? If you've used debug draw line or debug line, or any of the gizmos, which we talked about a while ago. Like I think I demonstrated that way back when we were back in Project 1, I think. We could use the gizmos to draw sort of debugging information in the screen on your own, so that we could use this gizmos in the game to see debugging information. Turn that on and off, right? Those little things, all these different things we can draw in there to see what's going on, right? So use of debugging tools, basically. Additive scenes. Okay, here's another one. Now imagine in here, if you're using load scene and trying to relate it back to the Singleton, but actually it's a different topic altogether, really. Additive scenes, this is the idea of saying, well, okay, I have another scene, like say I have this scene here, and I want to have another scene that loads on top of them. So let's do this real quick one for a second here. I'm going to say, okay, here's my Tilemap scene, and say I was working with a team, and we have 2 level designers. And the first one is design this level over here, and then I'm going to go in here and say, excuse me, here's my Tilemap Physics scene. I'm going to Control D to create another copy of Tilemap Physics, right? I'm going to call this right. All right, and this will be a good thing for the Don't Destroy and Load too. Let's watch this. Ready? So Tilemap Physics right. What I want to do in here is I'm going to say in this grid here I have my static grid. I'm going to open up my tile palette, and I'm going to start designing over here where I'm going to have this and this, and everything that's quote unquote off to the right. Right? And I want to erase all this other stuff. And I'll even go so far as to delete these other ones over here. And that shouldn't be there. So here's my next level. All right? And we accidentally leave the player in here. Right? So let's see if this will work. So the idea is that I've got my first level, this piece over here. Here's Tilemap. Oh, I did the wrong one. Tilemap Physics right, Tilemap Physics. All right, so we're going to start off in this scene. But watch, I have I'm going to create an empty object, again called manager in this scene. And I'm going to add a component to that called level loader. For the heck of it. Level loader. All right. New script, level loader, create and load. And what level loader is going to be in charge of doing, I'm going to do it just the silly way right now. I'm just going to say right inside of start, first thing, using Unity Engine Scene Management. I'm going to say Scene Manager dot load scene, and I'm going to use one of these specific modes Is load scene, or let's see. And we're going to load scene Tilemap Physics, comma, and notice we have load scene mode, and the mode that we want is what's it called? Load scene mode dot additive. And now let's make sure that we're using the right version of this. It was Tilemap Physics. All right. Okay. So in the start of this scene, it's also going to try to load Tilemap Physics into the scene. Now, what's immediately going to happen, for starters, is we'll probably get an error because I haven't added that other scene. I haven't added all my scenes to my build. So first thing, let's trigger this error here. Boy, that's going to be annoying. So let's see. Tilemap Physics. What happened? I didn't get a console. I didn't get an error. Surprised by that. Level loader. Thought for sure I would have gotten an error here. But let's fix this first off. Say build settings. And we're going to come over here, build settings, and make sure to say add open scenes, which is Tilemap Physics right. And we'll go into the project, scenes, and we'll add Tilemap Physics as well, just to make sure all our scenes are part of the build. All right? Not going to actually build it, but I'm just going to say build. Now, it didn't load it. Why not? So in the manager, level loader, let's set that breakpoint there. Tilemap Physics. Where am I going wrong here? Tilemap Physics. We're going to step into here. So we're continuing on. That seems. We're in Tilemap Physics, right? But did I not save it? Scene manager .load scene. Tilemap Physics. Level loader. Let's also go to the prefab there and disable the audio momentarily, just temporarily. Right. Let's double check to see what the Tilemap Physics scene looks like. Oh, you know what? Make sure it's not loading it and we don't see it because we're only looking at this scene over here. Maybe it's working and I just don't realize. No, it's not there. Okay, it is 3:47. For those of you who have places to go, obviously I can't hold you back. I'm going to kind of continue from this point on, at least solve this for a little while. What I'm going to do for the next couple of days is be as available as I can. So if you have any questions, definitely check on Discord. And if you have any particular things you're trying to implement, check on Discord, reach out to me, let me know, and I'll just do little videos like this to actually do some more, or find you some tutorials and things, right? I want to help you to wrap up your projects now. So please don't be afraid of reaching out to me. It's not too late, right? So let me know. Any questions before I keep on banging my head against this one? Why my additive scene loading isn't working? Any questions? Can everyone hear me? Still there? Okay. All right. I never know. All right. I'm going to solve this one, and then I might take a bit of a break because my wife just came home, I think, because you might have heard the jingle there. And we're probably going to have some dinner. We eat relatively early, and I'm sure I want to update her on the whole why I was home all day thing. So let's figure this one out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to Scenes and look at Tilemap Physics, and here's the Tilemap Physics scene. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add I'm going to add something else to the scene that's not in the other scene, just in case. So we'll throw that in there. And we'll go back to Tilemap Physics right. Save. Hit play. It's still killing me here. Tilemap Physics. Scene Manager, load scene. Load scene mode additive. Adds the scene to the current loaded scenes. Anyone have any suggestions? Usually I look over at Andrew and he says, "Oh, you forgot to," and I can't remember now. Load scene manager, load scene. I'm going to try to load some other scene. So here's me debugging, right? So I know I've got other scenes. Let's try to load the Singleton scene. Singleton scene couldn't be loaded because, okay, that's what I would expect. All right, so let's go here, build settings, project, and we'll grab our Singleton scene in our scenes directory. Put that in there. And let's do something really obvious to our Singleton scene just to make sure that we see it. And the obvious thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a UI text. We'll call that Singleton scene. Tell it its canvas is scaled at the screen size. Okay. Save. And let's go back to this one. And do that. There it is. So the Singleton scene is loaded. Yeah, you can see it right there. Singleton scene. So this is additively loading the Singleton scene to this scene. So the question is, what did I do wrong? Maybe did I get the name wrong? Did I? Tilemap Physics. Tilemap Physics. That's just going to work. That's what happens. That's what Unity does to me. Oh, well, I have to go to Tilemap Physics right first. Sorry. All right, let's go to Tilemap Physics right. Now it works just fine. I probably misspelled it. That's probably what happened. Yeah, you'll see now. We've got both scenes worth of stuff in here. There you go. When in doubt, restart it and just go backward and go forward back again. So there's additive scene loading. So I could create two scenes and have one as continuation of the next one. So this is really cool. I'm going to demonstrate one more thing, and then we'll kind of pause at least for a little while. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to put a trigger. Right? So this is something you see a lot in games. You don't want to load everything all at once. You don't load the entire level all at once. You load parts of a level. So watch what I'll do here. I'm going to say I'm going to add a sprite that I'm going to use as a trigger. So what do we got here? That's our little character. Animations, Tilemaps. What do I got? Okay. I'm going to use this little wood barrier to throw people off. I'm going to say, okay, I'll put that up here. That's just going to be a thing right there. And I'm going to add a component to it, which is going to be a I can't type a trigger. This isn't Unreal. This is going to be a collider 2D. I'm going to make it a box collider 2D, and I'm going to make it a trigger. And what I'm going to do is say that I'm going to add a component which is going to be my load level, right? Or my level loader here, right? So let's open up the level loader and say, well, this we want to have really on trigger enter 2D. Now this is, I suppose, just as dangerous. I'm going to come down here and say on trigger enter 2D. Let's just make sure that's the one that I'm calling here. All right. And I'm going to get rid of this one. So now level loader is going to be, okay, if we are triggered, then load that new scene. All right. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to the manager. I'm going to remove it from the manager now, because the manager, I could leave it there and it wouldn't break anything because the manager doesn't have a trigger on it or anything like that. But I'll just delete the manager altogether, right? Because I don't really need him anymore. And now let's watch. Ready? So we come over here and let's bring the player over. And the player touches there, and lo and behold, the scene gets loaded. Now, let's see, did I up in here? I've lost control of the player. Somehow I paused. There we go. Why is it automatically pausing? Console, check the console. There are 5 audio listeners in the scene. Please ensure. Oh, you know, I should be real careful. It's probably what's happening is that once it enters that, then it's colliding with something else, and then it's triggering again, and then triggering again, and then triggering again. So this is a case where I shouldn't keep loading that, right? That's a bad thing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, to prevent that, static bool trigger once equals false. And we're going to say if trigger once equals false, it's okay to load the scene. But we don't want to keep loading it over and over again. That's what was happening. So I'm going to say trigger once equals true. All right. So first time in, and I could probably use a singleton. You know, this is sort of a pseudo singleton here. It's going to say this is just a semaphore or kind of a flag. So this is if we're triggered, or if we haven't been triggered, we are allowed to be triggered. But once we've been triggered, we're not allowed to be triggered again. That's what's happening here, right? So now it shouldn't automatically. It was automatically pausing itself when it was doing that. I think that's what was happening. So all right. Oh, nope, still doing that. Only loaded one. It's not going to trigger again, right? Yeah. What is it about that scene that caused it to pause? Let's go to that second scene, make sure it's, so it is complaining. This is a good thing to check, right? More than one global light on layer default for light. Now, if you're not using the universal render pipeline, you're not going to have this problem. But I am, so I'll double check this. Let's see, so we'll fix that. Scenes, and it's going to be the one that we're loading, right? So we're loading Tilemap Physics. Save. So we'll get rid of like global light 2D. Delete. And we'll delete, we shouldn't have another main camera. That's another thing. We should only have one main camera. So we can delete that in here. So notice no cameras rendering. Right? Your secondary scene doesn't have to have that. And we fixed this, the players with the singleton, so it didn't have a problem. But we'll go ahead and we'll delete that too, because we don't really need that in the scene. So now save that and go back to our scene that sort of spawns that scene. See if that fixed our problems here. There, sure enough. Okay, so all right. That might have been, if you're not using universal render pipeline or multiple cameras, or so you should have only the stuff, the new stuff in the new scene that you really need, right? So don't have redundant stuff where you don't need to. So let's try that again. So there's the basic idea that, you know, the scene is sort of bare here at this point. Turn off the gizmos here. And then we trigger, and we get a whole new scene loaded at the same time. All right. So I'll stop there, and I will hopefully be able to pause this and put it on my YouTube channel. It's a long recording, but I'll go ahead and post it for anyone who's still interested. And do send me any questions you have. All right, take care. Have a good evening. Thanks for your patience. And I hope to be back on campus as soon as I can be. All right, take care.